Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's your boy, Il Duce Jack Slack. And it's the Fights Gone By podcast, episode 77, I believe. Might be 76, I have to go back and check. Coming at you on Wednesday afternoon, and a little bit late in the week this time. We're going to do previews and reviews, and also no star ratings really, because various stuff has been going on, and I've been working very hard to get this Ken and Tito thing done. So I didn't really give the fights my full attention, didn't give them the full breakdown. I watched almost all of them, I think. But there was a couple that I heard were bad, and I just couldn't be asked to watch them. But, you know, I'll give you my thoughts on all the good stuff. You know, Kevin Lee, awesome. Sayar did awesome work with front kicks to the body, so he's a boy. And, yeah, there's a few good performances on that card. There's a surprisingly decent heavyweight contest. But yeah, we've got tons of stuff to talk about there, and we've got a little bit of news, and the news sort of links into the Bellator event coming up this week, and we're going to have a good old-fashioned rant called Scott Coker, Have You Lost Your Damn Mind? So that's the order of things for today. Let's dive right into those UFC Barboza versus Lee reviews then. And I'm back with a cup of tea. I desperately needed it for this one. No, this is going to be pretty informal. I'm just going to sort of riff on what I thought about the fight. Well, I do that anyway, but not too many notes and not a set order to get through. Let's start at the top, because that's the bit that everyone fucking loved. Yeah, Kevin Lee looked absolutely phenomenal in this fight. I mean, everyone's going to... Now that Edson Barboza's lost twice in a row via being held down and battered, people are going to go, oh, rubbish guard, rubbish wrestling. No, just... In the first one, he met a really overwhelming wrestler. In the second one, he met a really overwhelming wrestler who also boxed him up. If you're pretending that Kevin Lee's boxing and Khabib's boxing were on the same level, you know, like Khabib jabbing up Al Iaquinta when Al Iaquinta wasn't moving. No, Kevin Lee looked much better here. And I was very surprised, because he surprised me a little bit in the Ferguson fight. If you don't know, Kevin Lee wrote into the podcast back in the day. I can't remember what episode it was, but... yeah, solid guy. But yeah, he's been hanging out at the Mayweather gym, which is a famously toxic environment. You know, Floyd pops in every now and again and puts huge amounts of money on sparring rounds, so the guys just kick the shit out of each other, and that's not great for either their health or the attitude in the gym. You know, the atmosphere. There's a great clip of either Lee or someone else. It's Lee sparring, but he's sparring some other lad, and one of them gets bundled to the floor mid-sparring session and does a kip-up and immediately starts punching the other guy square in the face while his hands are down. It's just the worst place on earth, but clearly he's boxing with very good boxers and getting much better. So I hope he's not leaving it all in the gym, because he looked better than ever on the feet in this one. If you noticed from the get-go, he was standing in front of Edson, he kept... readjusting, putting himself in the distance. He wasn't running at Edson like Khabib did, and Michael Johnson did that to a fair degree. Tony Ferguson definitely did that, but he was just not letting him get set. It was very similar to what Beneil Dariush did. Every time Edson stops and gets in stance, he just flicked the jab right on his eye, or nose, but eye is probably best, and Edson would move again. And you saw this in the Johnson fight especially. Edson will move, set up stance, to try and wait for that perfect opportunity to kick. And if you flick a jab in his face, he'll leave his stance and jog around the ring again. And he'll do a full lap. It's incredible. The guy wastes so much energy. That's why Michael Johnson and Tony Ferguson could tire him out without cutting the ring on him. They just ran at him and let him run himself out. Very peculiar, very peculiar. And rather than cutting a tight angle every time he circled off the cage, you want to be almost within range of the opponent, because as they follow you, that's the best chances to crack them with good shots. But Edson will circle way out to the side. Like if someone's stepping at you, if they're going really aggressive, you step out to 90 degrees, or 90 degrees to your right or left. But really, most of the time, you want to be going 45-ish, yeah? So you're kind of going up towards the center of the ring behind them. But Edson will circle all along the fence, all the way around. It's absolutely hideous. And I'm not saying that you should always step 45 straight past the person, but the idea is always get offline and then move towards the center of the ring. He gets offline and continues that course all the way around. Absolutely bizarre. But if you watched what Lee was doing, he shot. There was one shot that he took where he wasn't in position to shoot, and that was once he'd been wheel kicked in the head and done the Bambi legs. But every other time, he didn't shoot for the takedown. He shot for the fence, and he boxed with Barboza, and he'd kick with him too. He'd keep him moving, and then as soon as Barboza was close enough to the fence, he'd duck in, shoot straight into Barboza into the fence, and then he'd finish the takedown by picking him up or taking the inside trip. And it was perfect. Like, it accomplished the same thing that Khabib did, but it didn't involve running for 3 rounds to do it. Plus, he put his hands on him a lot more on the feet. And, Khabib is the one that everyone's going to compare this to, even though there's been about 5 or 6 guys now who've really shown this difficulty with aggression and just being flustered that Edson Barboza has. Jamie Varner, way back in the day, basically gritted his teeth and got straight in his face and then won the fight. But, even Beneil Dariush didn't win the fight, but he showed exactly how much Edson Barboza needs to feel comfortable to strike. If you're Anthony Pettis or Gilbert Melendez or whoever he fought, and you're giving him a kickboxing match, he is going to school you. He's got wicked fast kicks and great timing when it's out in that sort of sparring distance. When he really struggles is when guys fluster him, and you can do that by literally running at him or flicking the jab in his face anytime he gets set, or cutting the ring on him well, and there's just... It's one principle, but it's been applied like 6 different ways. It's incredible. But the interesting one in this fight was comparing it with Khabib, and we'll get angry Khabib fans coming in and going, "I think you'll find Khabib has wicked hands," or "He didn't cut the ring because he didn't need to," which is my absolute favourite. But I thought it was very interesting watching them on the ground, because Khabib really more known for his he hits some nice knee cuts, but more known for the smash pass, things that put him in like leg weave positions. Whereas Kevin Lee was landing using underpasses in this fight, and nobody really does those anymore, especially in the UFC. Haven't really seen him since Hatsuhioki left, because he was an awesome guard passer, but everything else sort of fell apart. And every time he fought, I'd go, "Oh, I hope he passes some guard before he gets beaten up." But yeah, Lee would, from closed guard, he'd tripod up, one hand in the throat, other hand punching. It was textbook Mario Sperry guard opening. If you've never seen the collected sayings of Mario Sperry on YouTube, it's absolutely brilliant. Mario Sperry's DVD series, really good, especially for back in the day, but still holds up fairly well now. He did a huge series on Vale Tudo, and on submission grappling, and on Gi Jiu-Jitsu. In fact, I think he did several on Gi Jiu-Jitsu, but he was the coach at the Blackzilians, so he's very much a legit coach, and he was the coach that made Brazilian top team back in the day. Along with Murilo Bustamante. But he had this amazing series, and someone went through and cut all these clips of him saying things like, "I can't do this. Well, maybe I can do this, but I won't do this." and things like, "This won't work. Maybe it will work if I was doing it with my mother." And just making sound effects. And there's a great one of him stacking up in the guard, going, "I give him one good punch. He give me maybe 3-4 faggot punches," and then going bang and demonstrating this punch. And Kevin Lee did it. It's so old school that he did it. And then Edson Barboza would open his guard too late and get underpassed. Double underpass. Classic. Old school jiu-jitsu pass. Never not viable. These things are never not viable. Unless it's something like the Gracie Gift. That's a form of underpass, actually, which I wasn't planning to link in like that. But the Gracie Gift was back when they opened the guard by pushing the hand through the opponent's closed guard onto the floor and then moving their body back. And this was sort of before they knew that it just gave up the triangle. Some of the very old Gracie Jiu-Jitsu videotapes still have it on. The ones with Horian. But equally, Roger Gracie then adapted that and still does a guard opening where he puts his hand down the middle of the opponent's guard and invites them to triangle him. But then Roger Gracie's 9 feet tall and shoots lasers from his eyes. So yeah, Lee was hitting this gorgeous underpass, binding the legs together, moving past, and then climbing up Edson. I would say he doesn't really hit as much in the guard positions as Khabib does. Khabib got stuck in the knee shield for a couple of seconds against Michael Johnson, and he just stood up and started punching straight down on him. And it's a legit answer. A lot of the best grapplers in the world, when they get put in the knee shield now, prefer to just stand up, give the reverse De La Riva or something like that and pass. But yeah, if you can just stand up and drop bombs, why not? But Kevin Lee is a monster guard passer. You've seen it time and time again. I can't recall much of the ground action in the Tony Ferguson fight. I should really go back and watch that. I remember being surprised by some of the action on the feet. And the other thing that Tony Ferguson I do remember doing very well was keeping Lee off him. When Lee was on his knees in closed guard, Tony Ferguson had one or both feet in his hips. And then so that takes away a lot of that stacking straight up and just punching you until you open your guard from a disadvantageous position. Where you saw Lee trying to sort of like push forward on him in the last sort of moments of that fight and eating elbows the entire time. And then that's when his hands got out of position and he got triangled. Because there's only been, last year there were 2 triangles in the UFC, 2 triangle finishes. It's getting to be a very rare submission. But that's because guys aren't as open for it. They're not, they're keeping their hands tight. They're very cautious of putting themselves in bad positions. Guys get a lot less cautious when you start elbowing them in the head, and you can do it consistently. I was on the boxing subreddit looking at this clip of Kevin Lee and some other guy sparring and doing that kip up, and some kind soul explained that Kevin Lee is legit, but his BJJ is suspect because he lost by triangle choke. And if you watched that submission, it wasn't anything to do with his BJJ being... Well, firstly, he's made a career out of passing the guard and then getting on people's backs. But it wasn't anything to do with his BJJ not being legit or him having great flaws in his BJJ. He was elbowed in the head until he did something, got out of position and then was triangled. You're not just going to go in there and hit like an arm push triangle on him. He was out MMA'd, if anything. Another cool moment that I wrote a full article on this comparing like the 2 beatdowns, but it was interesting because trapping the hand is becoming a lot more important in fighting on the ground in MMA. It used to be sort of like a gimmicky thing that you could do, like Gary Goodridge used to pass the hand under the back from closed guard. Very legit if you can catch that position, but quite hard to catch routinely. Ryan Schultz, I think it was, stopped Chris Hordecki in IFL back when Hordecki was like the wunderkind, trapped his arm behind his back and punched him in the face on the free side, on the trapped side rather. But it sort of fell out of vogue for a while, and it was like an occasional thing. But now you're seeing these really good wrestlers getting in positions where they are trapping the arm, and Ben Askren's a great one. If you watch any BJJ Scout work on Ben Askren catches that far wrist from the turtle, just won't let it go, and keeps pounding people from that position. If you watch Habib against Michael Johnson and Edson Barboza, as they crawl up along the fence or post on the arm, trying to stop, trying to scoot back out of a smash pass, he'll catch the arm around the back and then fold them down onto it, and that traps the arm on their side underneath them, and then he starts punching them on the free side. If you saw the Johnson fight, I'm sure you'll remember long periods of that, and then Johnson would muscle his way back up onto the arm, and Habib would just move forward and crush him down again, because it was basically your delt holding you up or bracing you there, and your delt isn't going to be able to take his full body weight, moving you off over your elbow down onto your side again. Kevin Lee, meanwhile, was hitting him in the gift wrap, really old school Gracie Jiu-Jitsu stuff. If you saw Rickson Gracie in his against his one legit opponent, Masa Funaki, he gets the gift wrap from mount. It's you catch the wrist. If you can force the opponent's wrist across their center line and catch it across their body behind their head with your arm, you could just hold on to that and start turning them, start looking to take the back. But Lee was just holding it and smashing him. And he started, he was punching originally, which is what Rickson used to do. But then he realized, oh, hang on, the angle of his elbow and arm aren't going to change. He's basically like, you're forced into a cross guard almost with one arm. So why don't I just start elbowing him? So he starts elbowing him. And there was one really bad one where Edson managed to... He was in half guard and he immediately dug under the far leg with an underhook, like he was going to move to deep half or something like that, but completely out of position and hurt. And that's bad enough. Like Cain Velasquez, Bigfoot Silva, Paquinho versus Jose Aldo. I can give you so many examples of guys getting stuck with their underhook on the leg and the other guy just sitting back and elbowing them in the head because that arm's then taken out of action. But he had that and was gift wrapped at the same time. It was amazing. It was the worst position I've seen a fighter get put in terms of being able to defend themselves from punches. Tremendous stuff. Now, the crazy thing about this whole thing is that Edson Barboza, amazing kicker, good left hook, decent counter punches when he's left to himself, but got completely boxed up on the feet and then was smashed for most of the first round and then was boxed up subsequently because he was just completely out of it. But he makes the worst decisions on the back foot of any fighter. I was going to write this before the fight, but I have never seen such a brilliant fighter with such an obvious flaw and such poor decision making. And his corner played into this. They were saying, he wants to jab you, because Lee was going southpaw and orthodox because he does that. But they were like, he wants to jab you, look for that counter kick. And it was just, the counter kick works really well if the guy's going to stand at range and strike with you. If you can counter kick underneath someone's straight punch, that's brilliant. You're getting a body kick, which are rare in against good opponents anyway, but you're getting a free path to their ribs. So if you see Badr Hari, and Donald Cerrone does it occasionally, drawing the right hand, Bas Rutten did it in Pancrase a little while ago. Well, not a little while ago, forever ago, but he did it once. Drawing the right hand out of the opponent and kicking underneath it with your left round kick. Very legit counter. Problem is, counter kicking doesn't really work so well under pressure. And the reason for that, and we talk about this quite a lot, but round kicks are not a good counter-fighting weapon under pressure, because if the opponent only wants to step in, if you throw the kick and they get inside that knee, you're on one leg, you're locked in place while you're attempting this kick, and they've just stepped in on you. If you want to use your legs as a counter-fighter against a really aggressive opponent, and it's not kickboxing, the answer is almost always going to be straight knees. If you land a good straight knee and you sink your weight back, you can pummel for underhooks and you can start turning off immediately. Lyoto Machida, not a tremendous wrestler, but stopped a lot of wrestlers from taking him down and was freely kneeing them a lot of the time. If you watch his fight with Phil Davis, he hits him with a knee. Davis almost catches the knee, but Lyoto in that small space sags his hips back, pummels for an underhook on that side, and just shucks him off. And Phil Davis was a much bigger, stronger light heavyweight than Lyoto Machida, and a much more accomplished wrestler. And he was basically, it appeared he was given the leg. The other thing is that, and this is the way I feel about, elbows and knees generally. You don't see enough guys using them against ultra-aggressive opponents, but you should look at it when else am I going to get a chance to do these? Elbowing and kneeing people is hard to do, especially if you're pursuing them. The best time to elbow and knee people is when they're moving on to it and you're just projecting a big shard of bone straight in their path. If you watch Nate Corbett, lands tons of elbows, most of them on the counter. But no, Edson just kept doing a switch kick, which takes even longer. Why? But he just kept trying to switch kick him and getting pushed onto the fence as a result. And he's done it in every fight where he's been bulldozed. It's because he's going up on one leg, he's wasting time, he's not able to move, and then he just gets smashed into the fence. And it's the same thing he was doing against Khabib. You're going and it's the ticking clock thing too. If you've lost 2 rounds, you're going, well, I better make it count now, I'll throw my hardest kick. And then you're just getting stepped inside again and knocked over. If any time a fighter gets into that mindset of got to make the one count and they're being pressured, it's never going to work. And this is the same thing I talked about the other week when we were talking about Max Holloway versus Khabib, and the exact same thing with Ronda Rousey, Holly Holm. Well, he'd have to get him with one really good punch, and I just haven't seen that one punch power. No, the idea is to keep circling away and keep putting some punches in their face. It doesn't need to be knock them out the first time. The other thing is that Edson's main counterpunch that he was looking for throughout this fight and throughout the Khabib fight is to slip deep to his left side and come back with a left hook to the liver, and he drops his hands while he does it and gets cracked in the head every time. And the other thing is, I keep saying the other thing, Edson is a frustrating fighter. I love him. I love watching him. I loved watching him against Anthony Pettis. That was a gorgeous performance. But there's so much wrong. It's just, and not in a, I'm not trying to be a douche. I'm just saying he has so much skill and talent that the specific choices he's making are really destroying his career at the highest levels. But he'll hold his fists in front of his chest, and that's his guard. It's absolutely bizarre. Anyway, enough shitting on Edson Barboza. Leave him alone, Jack. He's already dead. His cornerman hugged him, and I felt so bad looking at him at the end of this fight. But But they were telling him, look for the counter kick, and the one counter kick he landed was the wheel kick. And he landed it against Khabib sort of like glancingly too. So he's getting mad about that. Like, you know, he thinks that he can knock people out. Well, he did. Terriatin he knocked out. But it vary a little bit. Actually, just use your hands for the most part and then spin for a counter kick. Because then every other time you go for it, people know exactly what's happening. But yeah, that's Edson Barboza in a nutshell. Needs to learn to box, needs to drop the counter kicks against guys who just want to run in on him, and actually use footwork and his hands and the odd counter knee or counter elbow to slow guys down. Like there's nothing that that makes it unstoppable for people just to run in on him. The idea is that you make people slow down by hitting them and making them go, oh, can't be doing that, can't be giving him free shots on me. Well, I said this would be a brief recap, and then we turned into either an intervention or epitaph for... eulogy for Edson Barboza's career. Let's talk about some of the other fights, and then we'll get on with what we were going to talk about today. Corey Anderson, Patrick Cummins, boring fight. Won money, though, because that was a really good bet for some reason. I found a really good line on Corey Anderson winning by decision. Knew that Patrick Cummins only wrestles. So yeah, that was easy money, but I didn't actually watch it. Sayar, my boy Sayar, looked pretty good. He came into the UFC with people being like, oh, he's going to be the next guy to win the world title, he's a world beater, blah blah blah, and then he disappeared because he was injured for ages, and it seems to have actually helped, because now he just keeps surprising people with these amazing knockouts rather than having all that pressure on him of being the guy coming from, I think it was Shuto he was the champion of. So yeah, he looked great, and the front kick to the body, he threw loads of them actually, but front kick to the body and then an uppercut as the guy crunched over, clutching his body. It was a very Kung Fu movie style finish. LaFleur versus Garcia, didn't watch. Dan Hooker versus Jim Miller, also won some money on this because it was quite an obvious bet. But Jim Miller has been on the way down for a long time. Dan Hooker is in the ascendancy. You know, having watched him completely take apart an old Ross Pearson and Jacasey, with, you know, zero being put in trouble at any point, it was pretty obvious that he'd be able to look at Jim Miller and not have too much trouble working him out. But yeah, just put in long straight shots on him, and then when he ducked, he hit him with a knee. It was a lovely performance. There was a really nice takedown where Jim Miller lifted his leg up. He was trying to topple the tree, and then he managed to catch his arm from underneath his leg and just dump him on his back. It's pretty cool. But yeah, Jim Miller is way too old for this now. He's had a lot of fight years on him. As someone was saying, put him in with Joe Lozon for a third time. That might kill both of them, to be honest. But yeah, I like Jim Miller, but he's way past the days when he was a top contender. Aljo versus Brett Johns. This fight was everything I expected. You know, mediocre kickboxing between two very mediocre kickboxers. Aljo had a really nice little flurry in this fight where he threw like 4 or 5 punches and an elbow, and that was quite nice. But the most of it was just sort of, you know, takedown attempts and rolls and things, but not tremendously exciting for me personally. But I'm not giving it a star rating because I didn't give it the proper watch that I should have. Dave Branch versus Thiago Santos. I was so pleased for Thiago Santos coming up. I was like, this guy's exciting. And then Dave Branch just starched him. Absolutely brutal. Dave Branch, where did this come from? And against Luke Rockhold as well. Just came out and started swanging and banging. A guy who's known for boring decisions. Has a great nickname too, the Executive. But I would love it if he called himself the Local, or Your Local. Dave, Your Local Branch. So that's Thiago Santos' streak of, I think it was 4 wins and a good few knockouts. I think they were all knockout actually. Stopped because he was really good against Anthony. Is it Anthony Smith? Yeah, Anthony Smith. And I was watching that thinking, oh, this guy might be on his way to being legit. And he beat Jack Hermanson, who I like too. And Jack Marshman. God, he had a really good streak going, and Dave Branch just came in and took a big old steamer on it. Justin Willis versus Chase Sherman actually surprised me with some of the quality. Justin Willis's hands looked pretty good. Chase Sherman didn't land an awful lot of strikes, but a very tough customer. So much respect to him. Frankie Edgar versus Cub Swanson was kind of underwhelming. I mean, Cub didn't have any problem with takedowns, which was the last time he came in and he threw this enormous uppercut from behind him, and Frankie Edgar said, oh, thanks, I'll have your hips, and just took him down. And that was the way every round went. Cub was a lot more conservative in this one, but as a result, he just ate punches while he was waiting on takedowns. Frankie Edgar obviously shouldn't have been here for a start. Like, I was toying with betting against him. Like, I was going to start putting money on every fighter who comes back well before they should. You know, Frankie was suspended without contact until 2 weeks ago because he just got knocked out cold for the first time last month. And then he went on the MMA Hour and told everyone that he was sparring hard, like a couple of days later, which the UFC are encouraging this idiocy because there's no way that you could be... the people could expect him to go from no contact to training for Cub Swanson in 2 weeks. So he had been training with contact when he shouldn't have been. And this is just a continuing pattern of the UFC fucking around with the stuff that's been put in place as the bare minimum to keep fighters safe. You know, the bare minimum is not much in this sport. You know, you get like a 90-day suspension for getting starched. If you can't respect those, then when someone does die and you go to whoever, you know, the moral outrage is going to focus on the fact that you completely ignored the bare minimum requirements for fighter safety in this sport. But anyway, that was the card that was. It was pretty okay, I thought. Not bad. Oh, and there was that really weird chokeout, which, again, I've only watched it once, so I'm not going to weigh in too heavily, but it was very confusing what was going on there. Because I thought I saw him signal at the end of the fight that he was fine before collapsing, and there was a huge argument about it online, and the referees were all on the side of the referee, but I feel like if you've made it to the end of the fight, and you were conscious at the end of the fight, provably, and the referee has missed you going unconscious, surely he's ruled on previous action. They don't get a chance to retroactively change any other result. If you miss an eye poke, you can't then at the end of the fight decide that it was an eye poke. But anyway, like I said, I'm just bullshitting. I don't actually know the full details on that. It was very confusing. He did seem to knock himself out on the takedown, and the referee didn't stop it. But then that's on the referee. He clearly came around after that. Bizarre. So anyway, what we're going to talk about this week, we got some news, like there's a few bits of news to catch up on. ONE FC adopted the ring for their card and didn't tell their MMA fighters because they were having Georgiy Petrosian come in and kickbox. And then the MMA fighters were like, I didn't know my next contest would be in the ring. Classic ONE FC. Or the meme that I'm now propagating, that's so one. But so fuck them. They just brought in a new belt, and Fox Sports was pumping it up. So maybe Fox Sports teasing bringing in ONE FC for when the UFC go to ESPN or whatever is happening there. Equal split with ESPN and the Country Music Network is what I've been hearing. Rory versus Askren was teased. We're just going to do all the Bellator bollocks in a minute because I'm going to have a good rant about them. Edmund Targaryen, trained fighter, steps in to fight Gennady Golovkin. I was asking, is HBO ready for Edmund Targaryen? But I think he's still got a ban on cornering. I don't know if that's to do with his tax evasion. I think that's just to do with being a shady motherfucker. Ngannou versus Lewis was signed. Yay! I, for one, am looking forward to watching Derek Lewis try to bring his cardio to lever against someone. And then Holloway versus Ortega was confirmed. I don't think it's in Hawaii, which is a bit of a shame. But it is what it is, you know? So let's talk about what the people are really here for. They want to know what's happening with Bellator. Is it actually going out of business? It very well could be. I'm not reporting here, though I am a notorious reporter of lies. But the state of Bellator is something to be fucking beholded. So let's just recap some of the news that's happened. Rory McDonald and Ben Askren have been barking through the fence at each other saying they want to fight. I don't know if Ben is still under contract to crush cans in ONE FC. I believe that's why he had to retire rather than just say, I'm renegotiating or whatever, because I think he still has fights under contract. Head of ONE FC, who I found out afterwards follows me on Twitter while I was slagging him off. But he came out and said, yeah, we definitely do that. And I was like, really? Is that why you've never done a fight against not a can in the last however many years? But the last guy Ben Askren fought was Shinya Aoki, who was a lightweight. But the last guy he fought before that turned up in tie shorts, and I was like, oh dear, that's not good. But Bellator generally, like, the big news story coming out this week, well, I say big, I don't know if it's actually been covered properly, but the big news among world MMA journalists The big news this week was that Bellator's Russian fighters are unhappy at the number of fights that they're being offered. Which is interesting because that would be, these grumblings are always interesting because then you get to see what, K1, people started moaning about not getting paid or not being offered fights, or being offered fights and then not getting paid and then being offered an IOU. Like, Ray Safer was owed like $700,000 because he kept saying, all right, just one more, but then you've got to actually pay me. But these are the rumours that sort of start before things really get out of control. And the Russian fighters you would think would be the first ones because they're not. If they kick up a fuss, it's in Russian media, Bellator would talk, and this is one of the reasons that they're angry, because Bellator were talking about doing a Russian event at some point in the near future, and they didn't. And so guys like Shlemenko and Koreshkov are now looking for fights in like M1 because I think their contracts are North American exclusive, is what I read, but it might not be true. But I know that Shlemenko has fought in M1 before, so I imagine that's how that works. But Ryan Thomas, who's a good MMA journalist on Twitter, Ryan Thomas MMA, he did a little workout of some of their more famous Russian fighters and when they'd fought. And it's like one fight in 15 months or one fight in 18 months, and it's really not good. And it's one thing if you're injured or you've been suspended for a long time. Shlemenko was suspended for like 2 years because he got caught taking drugs in Bellator. How'd you do that? It's another thing when you've got guys like Koreshkov saying that they wanted to fight more. Because while Shlemenko is sort of like a fan favourite, but also sort of on the downward slope of his career, he was always a fun fighter, but he was never like a tip-top fighter. But he did just give Musashi a good fight, a hard fight, I'd say, not a great fight, but gave him a run for his money, and that has given him some goodwill and some publicity recently. But it's another thing when you're talking about Koreshkov, who is part of this welterweight revolution, supposedly, in Bellator. It was Koreshkov and Lima were holding that division together, and they were, and Daly, and they were really exciting, the three of them. And then you got Rory come in, and Lorenz Larkin, and Koreshkov's just sort of been out of the way. Lima's still fighting fairly often. Just fought Rory for the title, so yeah, I have no idea why you would try and piss off Koreshkov when he's such a top quality fighter. And the first thing they did when Benson Henderson came into Bellator was to feed him to Koreshkov, who was a weight class bigger, and they're the number one guy in that weight class. So they clearly decided at one point they wanted to give him some backing, and then now you're hearing nothing from him at all. Absolutely bizarre. Well, not really. It's more likely that they just can't pay him because they're paying all these old men. The one that I keep bringing up, because a lot of the time Bellator purses aren't released. A lot of the time UFC purses aren't released publicly because they are in various places like Norfolk, Virginia, wherever the fuck that is. But when they do release the purses, it's always interesting. So they released the purses on Chael versus Rampage, and that was $300,000 show money each, $300,000 win money for the winner. That's $1 million in purses alone for a fight that was on TV on a cable package that it's not like standard included, is it? Paramount was Spike, now Paramount, and I think they got like 1 million viewers or something like that, but $1 per viewer just for the purses on that fight, not even the advertising for that fight. Take every other fight off the card and just look at how much money they pumped into that one fight, which wasn't a good fight. And then consider that is what's happening with basically all these old timers. They're definitely paying Fedor hundreds of thousands of dollars. I imagine they're paying Mir hundreds of thousands of dollars. They could probably get away with paying guys like Ryan Bader less because the UFC very publicly didn't care about him. Or Ryan, what's his name? Phil Davis. But we know that Rory Mack was on like 400 grand. And to be fair, I would give Rory Mack 400 grand, but I don't know if he's... let's be fair, we don't know how much he's drawing. But yeah, if you're spending $1 million on purses alone, it's more than $1 million per fight in that heavyweight tournament. That's going to eat into what you can do with your money. I mean, people keep saying they're backed by Viacom, who are $1 billion company, but it's not like they have a room where they just keep all that money and Scott can go and take some of it out. Viacom are watching this and going like, what's going on here? And I think that Bellator have probably painted themselves into a corner because Viacom decided they liked the Tito versus Bono match, which got them really good ratings. So they're now overspending on tons of old men, and they can't afford to pay the rest of their fighters, is what it looks like. And, more evidence for that. Fedor versus Mir is happening this weekend, which is what we're going to get into in a second. But where Chael versus Rampage, you got Rory versus Lima as the co-main event. It was going to be the main event, and they switched it around. And that is how this stuff should work. I mean, I'm doing Tito versus Ken stuff at the moment. Every Tito Ortiz pay-per-view and Matt Hughes pay-per-view, whoever at the time, was getting around 40,000 pay-per-view buys. When they brought in Ken Shamrock for the Ken Tito fight, they got 100,000 pay-per-view buys, and every Tito fight after that got 100,000 pay-per-view buys, or around about that. That's how using an established star who's washed up to build viewership for your young fighters works. Have Fedor and Mir fight guys like King Mo or whoever, or you put them at the top of the card and then have a really good co-main event where you put your superstar there. So Darian Caldwell or Michael Chandler fought the other week. I mean, if you put him in on this card, he'd have been beating the shit out of someone just underneath there. So that's how you use that. But you've got Fedor versus Mir, which is guaranteed to bring in the nostalgic viewers that you want, and the lapsed fans and the casual fans. And you're going with a co-main event with Sam Cecilia in it. And I'm not missing something here. I checked out the what's his name, the lad fighting him, Emmanuel Sanchez. And he's got a couple of decent wins in the Bellator landscape, but this is not the kind of guy who's going to fight the washed-up Sam Cecilia and give you an epic finish, most likely. He's finished one in, his last 10 fights or something. Yes, his last fight was his first finish since 2014. And Sam Cecilia is coming off a 3-fight losing streak and then beating Marcus Galvao by decision. So why? Emmanuel Sanchez, the last time that they disclosed his payout was something like $40,000. I can't imagine they're paying Sam Cecilia the huge bucks. But then they signed Tim Johnson the other week, and I was betting that they just spunked their pants throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars at him, because Bellator doesn't seem to understand that just being in the UFC isn't a guarantee of star power. You got Neyman Gracie fighting on that card. You got Dylan Dennis fighting on that card. You got Rafael Lovato Jr., who is legit, versus Gerald Harris. Gerald Harris coming in as a last-minute replacement. That is a way more dangerous fight than anyone you could have put him against before. Gerald Harris was super legit and got cut from the UFC way too early, and has now retired twice, but is coming back from retirement to take on Lovato. Lovato, awesome grappler. I think his last fight he pulled half guard and then came up on the single leg, just like Damian Maia does. Very juicy looking boy, if we're honest. I mean, it's been pretty much known in the BJJ community. This guy just comes back every year looking more massive and vascular than the last. And he has only fought in Oklahoma, where they're probably not testing him. But a very exciting fighter nonetheless, a tremendous grappler, and his hands look decent too. I mean, I think he's got one of those simian reaches, because his arms look to come down to his knees. Dan Stidgen, great name, versus Mark Stoddard, which is close to Mark Goddard. Maybe they're hoping people to tune in for that, thinking that the ref's fighting. But just this card is this card. If I were Fedor, I'd be offended by this card. Everyone wants to treat Fedor with reverence, even though he's washed up and can't win a fight. But he's being put on top of this card that's just shit. Just someone smeared shit all down the card. So I was talking about this all week with whoever, but I'm willing to bet that Bellator is out of business by 2020. I have a sneaking suspicion that the only reason they haven't been bought up already is because of the monopoly lawsuits that the UFC is currently dealing with. And if you buy out your biggest competition, it doesn't look great. And I think Bellator might even be involved with lawsuits against the UFC. But it's pretty clear. Just look at this main event, the biggest main event that Bellator's doing for a little while. This is a tentpole main event, and then just an absolutely flaccid card. Nothing on this card. I mean, maybe Lovato or something, Dylan Dennis is fighting a 2-4 opponent, so not that either. But No one is going to go and watch this and be like, oh my god, Emmanuel Sanchez is going to have to keep an eye on him. Or if he even loses to Sam Sicilia, we'll go, oh, Sam Sicilia, late career resurgence, coincidentally, when he stops fighting really good fighters. What we need to do is, once Scott Coker has tanked this... fun fact, Scott Coker tanked his last promotion by hiring Fedor and putting on a massive heavyweight Grand Prix. So he's 1 for 1 so far on that. But what we really need is everyone in the fight... Well, fighters seem to like Scott Coker. That's about his appeal. That's where it ends. What we need is Scott Coker to stop running fight promotions into the ground and switch places with Bjorn Rebney. Scott Coker can run the unionization effort because he's good at dealing with fighters, and he obviously has existing relationships with the UFC. And Bjorn obviously was much better at running Bellator. Though Bjorn, I believe, did give us our first pay-per-view of King Mo versus Rampage, which was dog shit. And anytime I talk about Bellator like this, I get people being like, why do you hate Bellator? Why don't you... Someone was like, why don't you ever take it out on 1FC or someone like that? And I just linked them like 5 tweets I'd made that very day about 1FC and how shady it is. I write things about the UFC being shady all the time. What was the last one? I wrote 4 PR disasters waiting to happen for the UFC, which is never something I've actually done for Bellator or anyone like that. But I want there to be strong... On one level, it's the same thing with like drug testing. I have mixed opinions on it because, well, we'll talk about that another time. But on the subject of fighters outside the UFC, I want there to be strong opposition to the UFC because I like having more places to watch fights and it makes it more interesting. It also means that the UFC doesn't have a monopoly on the game, which is generally not great for business. At large, the UFC is already charging $60 for this dog shit UFC 224 card. I would rather them have to compete with people and be in a position where they can't just rip people off. Though this card is going to tank and they're going to have to, well, they'll probably ignore it, to be honest. But I'm hoping we get under 100,000 pay-per-view for the first time since since before Tito Ken, probably. On the other hand, I would like to see all the fighters in one place so that I can see them all fight each other. But it has become abundantly clear that Bellator as it is now is not a great place for that to happen. They aren't getting the viewers, they're overspending on old men, and they're pushing out their young talent on cards that no one's going to see. So that's what's going on there. Right, Fedor versus Mir. Fedor's going to come out and throw the right hand as hard as he can. If it lands first and he doesn't get hit, he might win. You're not going to see Fedor box, almost definitely, because Fedor doesn't fight like Fedor anymore. Fedor fights like what people used to say Fedor fought like. Back when everyone was like, oh, he's just a wild man, but he was actually doing really shit-hot stuff. That's what I'm talking about. What people thought he fought like then is how he fights now. Maybe Fedor takes him down. Maybe Fedor unleashes some ungodly ground and pound and shows Mir up where so many others have. If he gets flattened out and doesn't succeed on his first submission attempt, he tends to get battered. But more likely, Frank Mir is much bigger than him, much stronger than him, and at this point, a much better striker than him, as Fedor's been striking. And his chin, while wrecked, is not as badly wrecked as Fedor's. So I would expect Frank Mir to win this one. But again, this is another example of Bellator matchmaking being bizarre, because you could have had these guys fight young guys and actually get attention on the younger people who are more likely to win the tournament. The only thing that putting old guys against old guys does is secure one of the old guys going through to the next round, which I suppose is what they're trying to do. But, yeah. What a crock of shit. Let's do some questions. Hey Jack, love the podcast and find it refreshing to hear an Englishman's views on MMA. Brackets, I'm Irish. I find a lot of American analysts overly dramatic and serious and lack the ability to laugh at a pretty ridiculous but brilliant sport. I have a few questions to ask, but the first few are about the European and mainly UK and Irish MMA scene. Oh. Do you watch much BAMA, ACB, KSW or Cage Warriors? And if so, what do you think about the quality of the roster and which do you prefer? As well as that, what do you think about the talent coming out of Europe? Specifically, how do you rate the prospects like Nathaniel Wood? I don't know. Arnold Allen, Brett Johns, McCann Fishgold. Are these made up? And Pimblett, who I do know, from Liverpool. Drickus Duplessis, and any other big ones I've forgotten. Last two, who do you think would have been better between Asa and Hakuho if Asa hadn't retired, and obviously Akabono was absolute dog shit, but do you think sumo could ever have a place in MMA? And you should talk about Brendon Schwab more. He's such a knob, and it's actually terrible. Anyway, cheers for the hard work and time you put in from Connor. Good questions. Right, UK and European MMA scene. This is the same thing that I'm having with like kickboxing and boxing and everything at the moment. There used to be an old Japanese proverb about chasing two rabbits, and they used to refer to like trying two martial arts as that. But it turns out we can actually train two martial arts, and you get better as a fighter as a result. But watching all these combat sports is like chasing two rabbits or multiple rabbits. Like if you keep chasing multiple rabbits, you're never going to catch one. And if you're in England, the one you catch has tumours all over its face. But basically, I watch every UFC event and I have to write about them, and I try and watch every Bellator event, and between that it's very hard to watch anything, so I try and watch the things that I like, that interest me. But in the course of that, I have watched a couple of BAMMA and KSW cards, a little bit of Cage Warriors, though we got beef because they tanked one episode of Ringcraft by claiming it after I thought that they would not. So the Conor McGregor episode was up there with a load more stuff in it, and it had like 500,000 viewers within a day. And then we took it down, and it only got up to 250,000 viewers in the following days, which was a pain in the arse. And maybe cost us Ringcraft. So if you want to, like, send them death threats, that's... No, don't do that. But, like, yeah, so beef with Cage Warriors. But, yeah, I mean, I enjoyed KSW. I've seen a few of their events now because I like Kleber Koike Erbst, the wicked grappler with no striking and no takedowns. And who else do I enjoy? I've known a few lads who fight on these sort of events, BAMMA and KSW especially. The fight between Kaladov and Narkun, I did a huge piece in the run-up to, and I included it in my breakdown of the weekend afterwards on Fightland or Vice or whatever we are now. That was a terrific fight. That's as good a fight in terms of matchup, and also the fight was really good. That's as good a fight as you will see outside the UFC, because that was... Both guys could win fights in the UFC. They are of UFC level, and both were champions in KSW, and the fight turned out really good. I don't so much care for like watching Pudzianowski and people like that fight, because Pudzianowski is now at the point where he's a decent enough fighter that it's not as funny to watch him fight anymore. But yeah, I don't much care about that stuff. But they do seem to be coming along well, KSW, and they have a big viewership, so they know what they're doing. Like the freak show angle that they've done seems to be working very, very well. And the thing is that they've got guys like Popek Monster and Pudzianowski who are freak show fights, and they're not going to ruin it by like properly drug testing them or anything like that. But they are building like their brand. It's not, hey, look, here's Zuluzinho, he's going to fight Fedor. It's more they're giving opponents Pudzianowski and Popek Monster and people like that can fight at a level with. And, you know, the fights may be dog shit, but they aren't as horribly exploitative as a lot of the freak fights in MMA are. What were the other questions? What do I reckon of the... Well, Brett Johns, he's interesting. I'm quite interested. Like, Brett Johns, I noticed he doesn't move one side of his mouth when he talks. And I was wondering if it was like Bell's palsy or something like that, or a lot of people like suspect like nerve damage. Robbie Lawler does it too, so people get weird about that and say maybe it's nerve damage from sparring. I did a quick Google just to check if he's got Bell's palsy, to check I wasn't like gonna put my foot in my mouth or at any point. But one of the top comments was, "No, that's just what Welsh people look like." So that made me laugh. But yeah, Brett Johns is good fun. His hands are a little bit meh. He fights in a very... He's got that sort of Joseph Benavidez build where he puffs his chest out and has very short arms and looks like an angry midget or child. But I think if he worked on his striking a bit more, he could be a lot more dangerous than he is. He did look a little bit flappy against Aljo, and Aljo is not a good striker in any sense of the way phrase. Paddy Pimblett, rather. I always get looking forward to him. Every time he fights, I go, oh, maybe he'll put it together this time, you know. But he still does look very much like a regional product, and I worry that staying in Cage Warriors so long and staying like loyal to them means that he isn't going to fight as good opponents and have the push to get better. Which is why most people don't defend regional titles. People go on about Conor McGregor winning the Cage Warriors titles and not defending them. Nobody defends them. He didn't win them from people defending them. They were taken off the people who were supposed to defend them and then given to the fight between him and the champion, or the other guy rather. He fought no champions to win those belts, and that's quite common. Like, in regional promotions, you shop out your talents to whoever. The titles don't really mean an awful lot. And Pimblett's trying to stay there and make the titles mean something, or was. But I don't think there's any point. I think he should have moved on with his career by now. Asa and Hakuho, I don't know. The Hakuho is always a weird one, because you watch him and there's clearly amazing talent there. But a lot of the old-timers get really pissy about it and say, no, he was wrestling at a bad period. I don't really know. I didn't follow it as closely back then as I have more recently, in recent years. I'm not actually following it very closely at the moment, but I dip in and out. I think I prefer, wintertime bashos because there's less going on. I really want to make it out and see one, actually. This is one of the things I want to do. I'm just collecting a load of stuff that I can go on a trip and hang out with some people and interview people about combat sports around the world, or combat sports and blood sports, to be honest. I was talking about going to Florence for the Calico whatever, the bare knuckle football, maybe check out a bullfight in Spain, sumo in Japan, Senegalese wrestling, all that sort of stuff. I just love to go around and then write a book of that. Please don't steal my idea. Now that I've said that, please, better writers with more money, don't do that. But yeah, sumo in MMA, interesting, because Lyoto Machida famously credited his sumo for his background. But I think one of the interesting things about sumo is that the ring out matters in sumo, obviously. It's like the main way of people winning and losing. The ring out doesn't matter so much in wrestling. You don't want to really push people out of the ring. You want to succeed on the takedown. In grappling, especially, you watch Gary Tonnen come up on a single on Buchecha, and Buchecha just ran out of the area and then came back in. No punishment at all, and they start on the feet, and he was about to concede a really bad position for the first time in the match, and the only time in the match, actually. And Dylan Dennis tried the same thing against Tonnen. In fact, it happens all the time in no-gi. You do see guys get disqualified for getting into a triangle, standing up and walking off the mat, but they do tend to allow guys to run off the mat in positions where they shouldn't really, because they'd be getting punished for it. Like, if they stayed in the area, they'd probably get taken down or something like that. But in MMA, actually moving the guy around the ring is way more important. Getting to the fence is really important. Obviously, you can't grab the mawashi and you can't grab the waistband unless you're Anderson Silva. But I think it'd be really interesting to see more of the various shuffling techniques that they use in sumo applied in MMA, because you see guys clinch and out in the open, and it's a lot harder to work someone to the fence if you clinch out in the open than it is to tie up against the fence. So it'd be interesting to see if you could lock someone in a clinch and then push them to the fence more effectively if you train some sumo. But who knows? That's one of the interesting things about sumo. There are so many names for techniques used winning. There's about 8 different forms of push out or lift out or whatever. So there's a lot of subtlety to the actual pushing and pulling and the footwork of it. But I don't know if you'll ever see it catch on, but it would be very interesting to see someone, maybe who was the Czech guy who was really good at arm drags and went to sumo. But if someone like him came, an actual athlete, went and did a load of sumo and then came back, that would be interesting. And could I talk about Brendon Schwab? Nah, he's all right. He's harmless. But the thing is, if you're tuning in to laugh at him, you are just giving him money at this point. He has mastered the hot take. He knows what he's saying. He's a smart guy. And he knows that you're going to go, oh my God, did you hear what Brendon Schwab said? And then link to his video. Skip Bayless for the MMA people. Got a couple of other questions here, but I'm running out of time now. God, I shouldn't have left it so long before updating you guys. What am I going to be doing this week? This weekend I'm working on some last-minute rewrites of the McGregor book because, for fuck's sake, stuff keeps happening. But I'm also going to be finishing the Tito versus Ken episode. That should be going out Saturday night. And I'm putting a strict deadline on that because I'm going to be working on it right up until Saturday day. So if you're a Patreon boy, look out for that. It's going to be a good one. Lots talking about the Lion's Den and just really silly people. Really silly young men with lots of testosterone. And we'll be talking about Frank Shamrock and the whole Shamrock brother commotion. And so, yeah, if you want to get in on that, join up on the Patreon. It allows me to do these shows sometimes twice a week. I don't know if I'm going to manage it this week, but other times we do. And if you want to buy the book, maybe hold off. We're going to be re-releasing around Father's Day, which may be different in America. No idea. And if you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonepodcast@gmail.com. You can find all my work on thefightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack, and I patiently await Bellator swallowing their pride, coming to me and saying, you could do this better than Scott Coker. Cheers.